Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I'm Fiza Jamal with our main stories in detail. We start from Afghanistan, where 35 people, most of them women and children, have been killed after a bus hit a roadside bomb in western Afghanistan. The Herat governor's office says 17 others were injured in the explosion on the Herat-Kandahar highway. This comes a day after United Nations expressed grave concern over the deaths of nearly 1,400 civilians just this year. Moving on, Seoul claims North Korea has conducted 2 more short-range ballistic missile tests off its east coast. The second missile launches in a week, coming ahead of joint military drills by South Korean and United States forces. South Korean Defense Minister Jeong Kyung-doo said the missiles were launched from near the port of Wonsan. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said the launches didn't pose any immediate threat to national security. Cabinet Secretary General Yoshihide Suga said Tokyo will continue to seek a summit with North Korea despite the tests. Meanwhile, United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has expressed optimism about the resumption of denuclearization talks with Pyongyang. High-level trade talks between United States and China have concluded in Shanghai without either side issuing a statement. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin represented Washington. China's Vice Premier Liu He was Beijing's top negotiator in the talks. Expectations for a breakthrough were slim before the talks got underway. President Donald Trump has said United States is going to strike an arms control deal with Russia. In an interview, Trump said neither country needs to add weapons to their arsenals. Earlier, National Security Advisor John Bolton reiterated United States will withdraw from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty on Friday. He also said the 1994 New START nuclear arms treaty is flawed and unlikely to be renewed. Russia formally pulled out of the INF treaty earlier this month. And yesterday, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said Moscow does not intend to reverse its decision. United Nations has said Russian police appear to have used excessive force against protesters this weekend. Police rounded up over 1,000 demonstrators in Moscow in one of the biggest crackdowns in recent years. This report has more.
A UN spokesman says Russian authorities may have violated the basic rights to freedom of expression. UN human rights spokesman Rupert Colville questioned the disqualification of 57 opposition candidates from the Moscow city elections. The exclusion of opposition candidates from local polls triggered the protests. The opposition says they were barred for political reasons.
We're concerned that the Russian police appear to have used excessive force against the protesters during the rally in central Moscow on Saturday. We understand excessive use of force, or alleged excessive use of force leading to physical injuries, has been alleged in the case of more than 70 individual demonstrators.
A court in Moscow rejected jailed opposition leader Alexei Navalny's appeal for early release on medical grounds. He was jailed for 30 days last week for urging people to take part in an unauthorized protest. Navalny's lawyer and doctor said he may have been poisoned.
We urge the Russian authorities to allow people to organize and take part in peaceful assemblies without restrictions other than those permitted under international human rights law. And when managing crowds in Russia, as anywhere else, use of force by the police should always be proportionate to the threat, if there is one.
Meanwhile, Russian prosecutors have warned against further unauthorized rallies, saying they will face a crackdown. They also urged extra vigilance in the run-up to the local elections in September.
Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says normalizing oil and banking ties are the first step Tehran expects from European signatories of the 2015 nuclear deal. Talking to France's President Emmanuel Macron by phone, he said Europe has lost many opportunities to salvage the accord. Rouhani said Iran is the main protector of security and freedom of shipping in the Persian Gulf. Macron reiterated France's call for a de-escalation of tensions between Iran and the United States. He said France will continue to make efforts to persuade all parties to the 2015 deal to agree to negotiations. Algeria's army has rejected opposition demands for talks to be held to end the country's political crisis before presidential elections. In a televised speech, Army Chief General Ahmed Gaid Salah said polls were essential to end the political impasse. He warned there was no more time to lose, and a committee has been established by interim President Abdelkader Ben Salah to arrange the presidential vote, but it has made no progress because of opposition pressure to remove cronies of former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika from power. Meanwhile, China has pledged to contribute $1 million United States to Palestine's Gaza Strip food program. This comes amid acute financial crisis in the country after the United States cut more than half of its aid. The deal was signed in the West Bank city of Ramallah. United Nations is running more than 700 schools and a network of 150 healthcare clinics in the region. United Kingdom's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been warned of civil unrest in Wales in the event of a no-deal Brexit. Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford and local farmers say the situation could be catastrophic for the country. Johnson made his first official visit to Wales to seek farmer support for his Brexit plans, but Drakeford said United Kingdom is more at risk now than at any time in his political lifetime. Johnson argued the next move in Brexit talks is up to the European Union.
We cannot go on with the withdrawal agreement as it currently is, and everybody understands that it's dead. We need to get that message across to our friends. If they understand that, then I think we're going to be at the races. If they can't compromise, if they really can't do it, then clearly we have to get ready for a no-deal exit.
Johnson's visit to Northern Ireland is planned for later today. 2 people have been killed in Mississippi in the 4th mass shooting to hit the United States in 3 days. Police say the shooter opened fire at a Walmart store in South Haven, killing 2 employees. Police said the suspect was shot and taken to a local hospital with injuries. They said the suspect was believed to be a disgruntled worker with a grievance against his employer. This comes hours after a man murdered 3 members of a family at their home in a small Wisconsin town, and earlier 4 people were shot dead and 12 others wounded at a shooting in a California festival. Pakistan has welcomed 500 Indian Sikh pilgrims who are visiting the country. They have traveled to mark the 550th anniversary of the birth of the religion's founder, Guru Nanak. The Foreign Office said the celebrations will be held at the Guru's birthplace in Nankana Sahib on Thursday. Pakistan's High Commission in New Delhi issued special visas to the pilgrims earlier this month. Officials say the pilgrims will return to India after the ceremony. Japan has offered to mediate the peaceful repatriation of Rohingya between Bangladesh and Myanmar. Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono made the offer in a meeting with his Bangladeshi counterpart Dr. Abdul Momen in Dhaka. Momen said Dhaka will take a decision after internal discussions. The Japanese Foreign Minister will visit Rohingya refugee camps in the Cox's Bazar district. Kono will then leave for Yangon today to discuss the Rohingya with Myanmar's leadership. Myanmar and Bangladesh are in a stalemate over the return of Rohingya despite 2 agreements in November 2017 and January 2018. Ethnic cleansing by Myanmar's military in 2017 forced over 700,000 Rohingya Muslims to flee. Indian authorities have recovered the body of coffee baron V.G. Siddhartha from a river in southern India. His disappearance on Monday sparked speculation he was facing intense financial pressure. Siddhartha's Cafe Coffee Day chain has more than 1,600 stores across the country, beating coffee giant Starbucks. He was widely recognized from bringing the coffee shop culture to India, a largely tea-loving country. The recovery of Siddhartha's body unnerved investors, sending stocks plunging 20% to an all-time low of 122.75 rupees. The shares had already slid 20% and hit the lower circuit on Tuesday. The death toll from a dengue outbreak in Bangladesh has risen to 44 in less than a month. A health department report says over 15,000 people have been infected with the mosquito-borne disease this year. The report says nearly 300 people a day were hospitalized in July, and since the year 2000, around 60,000 Bangladeshis have been diagnosed with the disease. More than 300 have died. International diplomacy is a balancing act, but the installment of fluorescent pink seesaws on the US-Mexico border showed it could be child's play. Children and adults from both sides of the divide played on the 3 seesaws set up in New Mexico's Sunland Park. They were installed by Ronald Ryle, a professor of architecture at the University of California, to connect both sides. He said the swings recognize actions that happen in one side and have a direct impact on the other. U.S. President Donald Trump has made an anti-immigration crackdown a hallmark of his presidency and 2020 re-election bid. Teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg will travel across the Atlantic by boat to attend 2 climate conferences. Climate activist Thunberg will be a passenger on the Malaysia 2 yacht built to sail around the world. Earlier, she refused to fly to New York because of the environmental impact of air travel. She will later continue her journey by low-carbon transport to the annual Santiago Climate Change Conference in December. Greta's father and a filmmaker will accompany her on the voyage, which will take 2 weeks to complete. In August last year, Thunberg started a weekly school strike on Fridays, calling for greater action on climate change. Well, now we'll take a very short break. Don't go anywhere because more stories are to follow. Welcome back after the break. Now I'll continue with our main stories in detail. A Chinese city has won a 30-year-long war against erosion. Its successful ecological campaign has turned swaths of desert into a thriving forest. More in this report.
In 1986, the western Chinese city of Aksu began an ambitious tree planting project. Located on the edge of the Taklamakan Desert, Aksu used to be buried in sand for most of the year. Experts fought dust storms to engineer a green miracle.
To prevent water from escaping, we lay down in a ditch like this, using our bodies to block the holes.
Citizens and specialists worked relentlessly over the decades to bring fertility to the wasteland. The 13 million acre oasis has now made agriculture a pillar of the local economy. Once a sea of sand, Aksu is now renowned in China for its apples, dates, and walnuts.
Russia is home to around 200,000 Roma people. The community has a tense relationship with ethnic Russians, but a Roma theater in Moscow's city center continues to hold nightly shows and attract Russians of all ethnicities. This report has more.
The Roma people migrated to Russia from Poland in the 18th century. Before the Bolshevik Revolution, they faced discrimination and were characterized as criminals. This changed somewhat when Soviet strongman Joseph Stalin launched his Friendship of the People's campaign. Things reverted to the way they were when the Soviet Union broke up in 1991.
In the Soviet Union, the Roma were romanticized and portrayed as people who spent their time singing and dancing. But in the 1990s, the media began to describe them as criminals.
The Roma Theatre in Moscow, launched by Stalin in the 1930s, continues to stand as a symbol by a bygone era.
This theatre became a place which proclaimed that Roma were culturally equal to all the other nationalities living in the Soviet Union.
In June, a brawl broke out in the Penza region between ethnic Russians and Romanes. One ethnic Russian died of a stab wound, reinforcing the Roma people's negative image in the media. The theatre in Moscow is one of the few outlets in Russia showing there is a different side to ethnic Romanis. But as time passes by, the theatre's audience is growing older and few young people are showing up.
Let's take you to the world of business, where stock markets across Asia have dipped after trade talks between United States and China ended inconclusively. Hong Kong led the slide with a decline of 1.3% amid continuing unrest in the territory. The Nikkei closed down almost 1%, while the Shanghai Composite and Kospi shed 0.75%. European markets were mixed in early trading. The FTSE lost 0.25%, but the DAX and CAC indices edged up. Meanwhile, oil prices are trading higher for a fifth straight day after reports of falling U.S. inventories. United States President Donald Trump has called on the Federal Reserve to significantly cut the benchmark interest rate. His demand came before the central bank opened its two-day policy meeting. Markets overwhelmingly expect the central bank to cut the key lending rate by 25 basis points. It would be the first cut in over a decade amid a slowing global economy as a result of trade uncertainty. Expressing disappointment, President Trump said he would like to see a larger cut of 50 basis points, but a cut of that size is only used when the economy is experiencing a steep slowdown. Earlier, the Federal Reserve chairman signaled rates could be lowered due to economic uncertainties. South Korean electronics giant Samsung says its profits have plunged 56% in the second quarter of this year. It attributed most of the decline to falling memory chip prices. Samsung posted an operating profit of about $5.5 billion for the 3 months up to June. The results are in line with the company's estimates. Samsung said the decline reflects a broader slowdown in the industry, which has weighed down by US-China trade war. It also faces more disruption to its chip business from a growing trade row between Seoul and Tokyo. Meanwhile, United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said he will encourage the two sides to end their dispute at an ASEAN meeting in Bangkok this week. And now we'll move to the world of sports, where the World Boxing Council has provisionally suspended Dillian White's interim world heavyweight title. This comes after the British pugilist tested positive for a banned substance earlier this week. The WBC has also deferred White's match against America's Deontay Wilder. It said White will be given an opportunity to defend himself at an investigative hearing. White has been ranked #1 by the WBC since last year. And let's take you to the Pan American Games in Lima, where Brazil have won the gold medal after beating Argentina in the women's handball final. The Brazilians eased their way past Argentina by 30 goals to 21. The victory enabled Brazil to capture 6th consecutive gold in the continental competitions. Both teams were tied at 12 goals by the end of the first half, but Brazil powered ahead by scoring 18 goals in the second half. Earlier, weightlifter Francisco Barreto of Brazil clinched gold in the 109 kilograms plus category. Cuba's Luis Lauret claimed silver, while Mexico's Raul Manriquez secured bronze. French champions Paris Saint-Germain have signed Everton midfielder Italy Sakai on a 4-year contract. Financial details of the deal were not disclosed, but reports suggest PSG would pay about £30 million for the player. The 29-year-old Senegal international joined Everton from Aston Villa in 2016 and made 108 appearances from the Merseyside club. Hundreds of Kenyan professional athletes make a good living from running marathons, but the East African country has suffered international embarrassment due to a string of doping scandals. More in this report.
Kenyans are legendary marathoners, making up 38 of the world's top 100 runners this year. But the country's anti-doping authorities have struggled to stamp out a culture of drug use in its athletic fraternity. They say more needs to be done to clear the suspicion surrounding Kenyan athletes.
We need to do more tests, we need to do more education, and we need to get less of the positive cases that we have.
A total of 138 Kenyan athletes tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs in the last 14 years. Thousands of professional runners are registered with Kenya's Athletic Federation, but only a handful of elite competitors are regularly tested. Some athletes say they have no choice left in order to compete with the best.
I'm cheating because some people have cheated. And that I can guarantee you that is 97% are cheating. Even for today, I can tell you, big stars, they are running now. They are running, but they are not running clean.
Kenya has created biological passports for about 40 elite athletes to track their data over time. Efforts from the country's anti-doping agency are starting to bear fruit, but more remains to be done to eradicate this practice.
While the sun is playing hide and seek in Lahore, let's see what the weather is looking like today around the globe. Well, this is it from me giving you our main stories in detail. You can also choose to read all the follow-ups on all of our main stories. You'll find them online at indus.news.